"58% of Americans oppose critical race theory in the classroom," according to a new survey. Now just imagine what kind of message we could send the public schools if even 10% of those families kept their kids home in the fall. I'm Dr. Duke, she's Katie, and this is the Dr. Duke Show. Oh, excuse me. Just getting 40 winks on my incredibly comfortable MyPillow. Today's show is sponsored by Mike Lindell and our friends at MyPillow. Can you remember the last time you had a great night's sleep? I just had one on this desk. The only thing that would have made my sleeping at my desk more comfortable if I had a set of Mike's really, really comfortable Egyptian cotton Giza sheets. They're on sale this week. These ultra soft, extremely durable sheets come in a range of colors and sizes. Right now, our audience can get 2 sets of these sheets, 2 sets for the price of 1. So you buy one, you get one free, and you'll get free shipping. What else could you possibly want out of the best sheets you can get in America? Simply use the code Dr. Duke. That's right. You type in the name Dr. Duke, DRDUKE, and you can get 2 sets of sheets for the price of 1. This maybe we can get Katie one then. So again, simply use the code Dr. Duke and you can get up to 66% on all merchandise. And this week, you can get 2 sheet sets for the price of 1. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Dr. Duke Show. Today, we start with a new poll that finds a majority of Americans reject the ideal of critical race theory being taught in the classroom, and it's a sizable majority. Yet, unsurprisingly, the ones that support it are almost all Democrats. And the more education you have on the Democrat side, the more intolerant you are, the more you want kids judged solely by their skin color. It's an interesting survey, and Katie will give you more of the deets on it, but it's completely demonstrates what a divided country we are right now. Not surprising to anybody, more women and more college-age women, the bane of existence apparently, side with the radical left on this. All these left-wing initiatives, progressive women have no problem using racism to fight racism. It is the demographic that's very high in this. And to surprise nobody, the Democrat Party supports this by 86%, and only 20% of independents and 6% of Republicans want their kids used as sociological petri dishes.
And if you want to go a little bit more macro on it, overall, they found, it's a YouGov poll, it was sponsored by The Economist, they found 58% of Americans, just 58% of America is saying no to CRT. They have an unfavorable view, and 38% then view it favorably. And the simple fact that you can get 38% of people to view CRT favorably is astounding to me, but we all know what critical race theory is at this point. We've talked about it, Marxist philosophy, basically saying that if you're white, or just in this country, this whole country was founded on, racism and slavery and everything else that isn't the whole truth. So when they took a look at this, when they broke it down by the various demographics, as you teased, unfortunately, my demographic, being a white female with a college degree.
And a graduate degree.
Well, it just says college degree on theirs, but yes, I have maybe my breakdown would be a little bit better if the college degree next probably be worse. But anyway, they have the worst breakdown of critical race theory being favorable. 44% of white women with a college degree said, yes, we favor critical race theory.
And my analogy to this is very different. What's really so frustrating about critical race theory is it is by definition a activist, political, left-wing form of education. They're telling you from the get-go, we're not going to treat sources fairly. We're not going to show both sides of the issue. We're not going to expose kids to multiple perspectives. In fact, we're going to lecture kids, and we're going to judge them on their skin color. This is analogous to saying, hey, slavery's always been with us in America, okay? You know what else has always been with us in America for the last 400 years, going way back before 1621? Christianity has. So how would you feel if Christians controlled the universities the same way the radical left does today, and they imposed Christian race theory? Or Christian reality theory, we could call it. In other words, that every book read and assigned in high school and college, every book assigned to your middle and high school kids, your elementary school students, had to read everything, math, science, all through the funnel of Christian theology. How'd you feel about that? As a Christian, I would not want any part of that. But apparently, because we're going back and doing the same thing with slavery, we can distort reality, we can twist facts. My analogy about Christian reality theory. Can you imagine being forced to do science through primitive theology? Can you imagine doing that? Can you imagine the glories of being able to teach that marriage is just between a man and a woman? Wouldn't that be a great thing for Christian theology and Christian faith? Would it radically pump up Christianity worldwide? Absolutely. But you wouldn't want it in the public schools, as you progressives so often say, because it's partisan, it's political, it's bringing in a perspective that chokes out other perspectives, okay? But when you do it somehow and make slavery and racism the raison d'etre for it, suddenly it's just all wonderful. Don't give me this garbage, one's religious and the other one's not. It's almost blasphemy to go against critical race theory. It is, they will cancel you. It's the analogous to being burnt at the stake on social media if you say the wrong thing. We've got a story coming up down the road here this week about a university that has released another list of words you can't say, including words like picnic. This is orthodoxy. They have all the grand inquisitors in place. All these academic, they're like monks with their tonsures, right? In their academic garb. Hell, they're even at graduation time wearing the same stupid robes they used to do in medieval graduations. All these diversity officers. Don't tell me you don't have an inquisition here. It is an inquisition because it is a religion. It's an advocacy religion that promotes atheism, materialism, progressivism, and yes, I'll say it again, racism against white people as a way of rectifying what you seem to believe is a history of racism.
Now, I think it should be noted that when you look at the breakdown of favorability versus not favoring critical race theory, when they broke it down by more than just a yes-no, it's interesting because 25% of the participants said they have a very favorable view. Very favorable.
Which conforms to about the number of progressives in the country, right?
Sure.
Yeah.
I'm not sure, but 13% then had the somewhat favorable, and that's how you get your 38. But on the other side, when we're talking about an overall 58% saying they're against it, 53% of that say very unfavorable.
Very opposed,
and so
right.
when you take a look at like the ends of the spectrum here, more people like really don't want critical race theory than are saying, yes, I like critical race theory. So that is something to note because that really gets at how most of America is actually feeling. It's not just the wishy-washies. It's like, no, we're staunch in our opinion on this, that we should not have this. Let
me recap this and tell me if this is accurate based on the numbers. Conservatives, Republicans, and independents overwhelmingly reject this, whereas even on the progressive side, 38%, only 25% really support it. And if you think about the breakdown of America, this is still true. Probably 40% of the country is conservative or more mainstream conservative. Only about 25% of the country is what we would call radically progressive. And yet, even in this survey, you see that the rest of the country is united vehemently against critical race theory, and there's 13% even of progressives or liberals who are not really sure about it.
And then they do have another question about whether or not this would be good for America. Like, is it going to be good or bad? Not just like, are you okay with it versus not, but is it like, when you put it to the country, 55% say it would be bad for the country. Yeah. So they're not even taking their personal, they're supposed to be projecting it out onto how they view it as the whole country.
And it's bad for the country because it's not education. When you are stifling debate, you are disowning critical analysis, you are not allowing multiple perspectives to be heard, you treat people who challenge this as traitors and racists. This is not education. And so actually probably surprised the numbers should be a lot higher against this garbage.
We have a lot more critical race theory to talk about, but before we move on, just a quick reminder that the best way to access our content is to download our Freedom Project Media app. Simply search Freedom Project in your app store and make sure you allow for notifications once you download. Also, if you like listening to the audio podcast, we're available on Apple, Google, SoundCloud, and everywhere else. Now, posters. Posters are now wreaking havoc, causing issues at the Lakeville Area School District in Lakeville, Minnesota. So at Lakeview Elementary, they had these Black Lives Matter posters placed all around the school for months. And initially, the school board, good old school boards are back in the news. School boards said that the posters were political, and so they had to be removed. Yeah, so parents complained.
So the superintendent, the school board basically said, we will not have these posters because, as I just got through saying, this is a political position, right?
Yep. But then the board went against their own actual determination, and they put up 2 posters as part of an inclusive poster series.
So radical left-wing politics is what they consider to be inclusive.
Yes. So according to their local news there, they said the poster series includes 2 of them that say Black Lives Matter. And it's important to note on here, when they wrote it, they said like Lives Matter with lowercase, not Black Lives Matter, the organization. Okay. And so the district, they said they stand for social justice movement, but those people who are opposed to this whole thing say that it's Black Lives Matter global network. So the organization, okay, I'm just laying out the facts. That's like saying
Disney writing Disney in lowercase letters and saying, but it has nothing to do with actual Disney. I'm not really promoting Disney. It's just my version of Disney.
Yes. So opponents say that having any poster with Black Lives Matter on it is going to automatically go to this. Okay.
And it is political.
And so now we have a 9-year-old student, a 9-year-old female, who decided to go to the school board meeting in June and raise a ruckus.
Now, I don't know if she wrote her own script, but the sass with which she delivers it is salty.
I was told 2 weeks ago at this very meeting spot, no politics in school. I believed what you said at this meeting. So at lunch, I went up to my principal to tell him about the BLM poster and that I wanted it down. He said it's not coming down. I was like, yeah, it is, because the school board said on May 25th, no BLM or politics in school. He said, that's weird. They were the ones who made them. I was stunned. You have lied to me, and I am very disappointed in all of you. You cannot even follow your own rules. If you're going to do that, why do we follow any rules we deemed unfit or ridiculous? I'm not following your mask rule anymore then. Get the posters out of our schools. Courage is contagious, so be courageous.
She is a primary stakeholder. This is her future's at stake here. The way she is taught, the way she is prepared to read, to write, to do science and math will affect her ability to earn a living, to take care of her own family. She is right. These are public schools. They belong to moms and dads who pay exorbitant property taxes to fund these ridiculous schools. She is the primary stakeholder. That's why I love when she went to the principal and says, you're taking them down. She says, no, I'm not. She goes, yeah, you are. I love the fact that she calls them out. She goes, you guys said you were going to do this. Now do it. And if we're going to start ignoring all the school board rules, I'm not going to follow your stupid mask policy. She's right. And if this school board recognized what their job was, who they should be looking out for, and who funds their nonsense, they immediately do what this little girl asked for. It is shocking when you think about it. Out of the mouths of babes comes more common sense, more consistency, more actual reason and logic than you get for all these elected school board idiots.
And I like to go by the phrase, and I've seen it in schools on walls, that good enough is not good enough. And so I like to say that phrase to my high schoolers at work. But I like her phrase of courage is contagious, so be courageous. Because we have way too many school boards, way too many teachers, way too many parents, not being courageous and standing up to all this. Because if you don't stand up and be like this 9-year-old girl, nothing's going to change.
Well, and I'll bet every dollar I have in my waning bank account that what happened is that the school board said correctly, this really is politics, we should stay out of it. Then superintendents, principals, and teachers berated them, mocked them, pressured them, and says, how can you not support these political initiatives in the school? Are you anti-racist? Are you actually standing up for minorities? I'm sure they were worn down by progressive teachers and administrators, and so they conceded, right? All right, put the 2 pictures up. And you see what's coming here, right? You got a bunch of school administrators who are pushing for this change, the transformation of American education away from actual learning and towards politics, and this little girl's right. I mean, I've seen a lot of people stand up to the school board and all different backgrounds, and they've all been precious and wonderful in their own way. But what she said not as an entitled little child, not as somebody who was a victim, no victimhood in her. She basically looked them in the eye and told them, this is my education. Give me an education. Stop giving me your stupid politics. Good for her.
Okay, so in Massachusetts, let's remember Massachusetts, land of Elizabeth Warren. So they are now forcing students to comment on how systemic racism has impacted George Floyd's life.
I guess
How it
was,
impacted George
yeah.
Floyd.
So in other words, you don't have an option. You can't say it didn't.
I'm letting people think about that one for a
Now
moment.
you're teasing it. Can I ask you a
Yes.
question while you're teasing that?
Yeah, sure.
So if could we also speculate on how that fentanyl got in his blood?
If you'd
So
like
so,
to
I,
go
so
ahead and do
white
that.
so white privilege apparently strapped him down and injected fentanyl right into his veins. That was white privilege. Was it white privilege? Was it white people that caused him to shoplift from a local bodega? Was that what happened?
It might have.
Okay, just check.
Well,
white privilege is a remarkable thing.
Yes.
It can do it's like Superman, right?
How dare you bring up Superman, you patriarchy. All right, parents defending education reported that a history class at Concord Carlisle High School did a lesson that was titled Race in the Post-Civil Rights Era, George Floyd, Black Lives, and the Persistence of Racial Inequality. The fact that we are calling basically history lessons now the titles and subtitles of books is insanity.
Yep.
It used to just be like, hey, we're going to talk about World War II now.
We're talking
There's
about,
our lesson.
Even if you said we're going to talk about race in America,
we're going to talk about the
now you ripped from the headlines
Battle
of
of
some
Gettysburg
race
today.
huckster's book, right?
All right, so you basically you knew this was going to happen because it's history class, and now in all history classes, what do you read about? Current events that with articles written by either the New York Times or the Washington
That's
Post,
right.
and in this case, it's the Washington Post story. They had an article about George Floyd's life, and so the students then in this high school in Massachusetts were forced to read it, and that article was titled "Born with Two Strikes: How Systemic Racism Shaped Floyd's Life and Hobbled His Ambition." It hobbled his ambition, they say. Well, the article had argued that the strictures of the systemic racism led to Floyd's death. So it was racism that led to his death. And the lesson asked students to read yet another Washington Post article that was about systemic racism, with housing, education, economy, law enforcement, or healthcare. So you see what they're trying to do here. Obviously, they're even titling it with systemic racism, but George Floyd, everything in that is America, is the reason that he's dead now.
So
they're conflating the two, obviously.
So Floyd had no choice.
No, it was
Floyd
going
was
to...
a victim of culture.
Yes.
This is what we call sociological or social determinism, right? He had no choice. From the moment he was conceived in his mother's womb with skin slightly darker than yours and mine, his whole world had been decided for him. His drug use, his violence, his long rap sheet, his endless encounters with the police, all of that had nothing to do with anything George chose or any way George had any kind of control over. It's my fault and your fault, Katie.
Yep. So with this lesson, the students weren't given the question or option to be like, oh, could this have impacted, or any sort of leeway?
Is this a conversation?
This is what happened. And so the students had a little activity with it. They had to create a slide, a little PowerPoint slide. It wouldn't even said to give your slide a title. Hopefully it can fit on the slide if they're giving a title, titling it things like this history lesson, a colon slide. But you can see the largest section of this entire slide focuses on Floyd himself. Here, talk about George Floyd's life, how it was impacted by the system or the institution. How did it impact him on a personal level? How did it shape how his life unfolded? What did George Floyd do to deal with the system or institution? What decisions did he make in response? How did this decision matter? How do any of these kids, know exactly what was in George Floyd's head? Because they don't. And why? Why are they doing this?
One stupid little article, they know nothing. You know what the Washington Post wrote about the hardships of being Floyd, right? And why it's white people's responsibility. But how could kids are not prepared to do that? They don't understand. Even if they were allowed to argue the other way, the entire premise of the assignment that wouldn't let you do it.
But here's the deal. They did know because they did read that article. So they knew.
Well, and they're white, and the white kids are white.
Yes, let me read a little excerpt. From the article. George Perry Floyd came of age as the strictures of Jim Crow discrimination in America gave way to an insidious form of systemic racism.
So Jim Crow was actually surpassed by something insidious and worse.
One that continually undercut his ambitions.
Okay.
Throughout his lifetime, Floyd's identity as a black man exposed him to a gauntlet of injustices that derailed, diminished, and ultimately destroyed him.
Did they name any?
According to an extensive review of his life based on hundreds of documents and interviews with more than 150 people.
150 people
150
pretending
people
they know what happened to George
talking
Floyd.
about George Perry Floyd.
George Perry Floyd. It's an awfully white name for a black icon. Just saying.
Well, the 150 people included his family and colleagues and scholars.
Oh, yes. University.
When you get the scholars involved, then we obviously know exactly what's happening.
Poor George.
Yeah, I'm not going to read anymore. That's enough,
George.
though. But that's what's being taught in your history classes.
And there's no deviation. There's no contradiction. I started off by pointing out, all those sociological disasters that George Floyd found himself in, drug addiction, endless encounters with the law, grifting, potentially assault and battery in his background. Okay, none of that had nothing to do with him. It's all about the culture. It's all about white people in the culture. So in other words, you can tell the so-called gauntlet that he faced. That's why the New York Post never lays it out there, though. What is this gauntlet? Tell us. What was? Did somebody stop him going to school? No. Did somebody force him to choose the path he did in 6 and 7 different ways? No. In what way can you actually say he felt this gauntlet? If you don't explain that, you got nothing. And they don't explain it. They never do explain it. Time now for Instant Classics. And if you've been paying any attention to the news, you will have seen over the last few weeks how this critical race theory that we're seeing imposed on little children is also being imposed on our armed forces under the drowsy and incoherent leadership of Chief Commanding Officer Joe Biden. The major commitment is not to fight wars, to prepare yourself on a global level to defend the Constitution. No, the purpose of the military now is to make sure that the real threat to the world today, white, heterosexual, American men, are brought to heel. And so conservatives and Republicans in the military are being reprogrammed, or they're being punished or disciplined, and all on the basis of critical race theory. So you're creating an army now that is bent on destroying a certain element of its own people and turning a blind eye to what's happening on the international stage. This never ends good. I hope I don't have to cite history to remind you how this doesn't end good when you're training the army primarily to encounter its own people. So this week I decided we would do George Patton Week, all right, to remind us what real military leadership was, number one, and what the purpose of the military is. Hint, blowing things up and killing things being among the two primary issues. Here are some quotes from General Patton. He says, quote, "I am a soldier. I fight where I am told, and I win where I fight." When was the last time the American military's position has been victory? Well, probably World War II. That we are not going to stop fighting till the job is done, and we will be done when we have brought all of our enemies to capitulation. That's called soldiering. Number two, no good decision was ever made in a swivel chair. Boy, that's great. No seriously good decision for the American people was ever made by some professor in a swivel chair, some New York Post writer in a swivel chair. No, it comes from men with experience on battlefields. Number three, how about this quote? "The test of success is not what you do when you are on top. Success is how high you bounce when you hit the bottom." Can you imagine if we applied that to George Floyd's life? Oh my goodness. How about this? "The object of war is not to die for your country, but to make the other bastard die for his." Yep, that's exactly right. And finally, Patton said, "A leader is a man who can adapt principles to circumstances." A leader is a man who can keep his principles and make them fit circumstances, rather than you listening, Joe Biden and you Democrats, giving up all principle to what? The pursuit of naked power and nothing else. Cowards.
All right. If you enjoy our content, please consider joining the Patriot Club. Your one-time $99 tax-deductible donation allows us to keep bringing you these stories every day. Simply visit patriotclub.us to get signed up. That's patriotclub.us. And of course, as a little thank you, we will ship you our signature tumbler. Now, before we go, let's show some love to our Patriot Club members. And today, we're giving a shout-out to Charles from Fort Mitchell, Kentucky. Charles, thank you for supporting us.
And that's our show. For Freedom Project, I'm Dr. Duke. She's Katie. Until next time, stay educated, my friends.